Hello everyone. Um, we are at Module 2. We're making connections between what we have studied in Module 1, which is more on the foundation of the theories, the teaching and learning theories, and the importance of the use of zone of proximal development in order to best enhance students' learning and challenge them and put them in situations where they can learn in a comprehensible input environment, yet not push them too much beyond their zone of proximal development. So we learned that. We learned about Krashen's second language acquisition hypothesis and why is it important and the implications of the second language acquisition theory for our teaching and hopefully for the next step for assessment as well. Today in this module and throughout this week, we're going to make connections between the theories of teaching and learning and Krashen's hypothesis, and now making sense of it and making it into practical integration in the classroom. What are the good methods and strategies that we can use in our classroom in order to support our students' needs and best ensure that they're going to get best evaluations and results in their assessments? Again, I cannot emphasize more on the importance of the start to get to the end, the importance of your methods and your approaches and your strategies and the instruction that you use in your classroom and how it affects the assessment at the end, and how important it is to understand that your choices of assessment, especially performance-based assessment, is really connected and tied into your choices of instruction. You cannot assess something that you did not assess, that you did not teach, and you cannot assess in a different style than what you taught. So, for example, when we talked about behaviorism and how the teacher is in control of the process and how the teacher is the one who's doing all of the work and the students are absorbing the instruction, this means that students are starting to be dependent on the teacher. They will not be able to think alone and don't ask them questions to that is beyond the content that they have memorized. So it makes sense that your approaches and methods your methods and strategies, your methods and strategies match with the behaviorist approach, and it will make sense that your assessment has to match with what you did. So your assessment or your test will be more into direct factual tests and assessments. You want to assess the students' memorization to evaluate how much did they absorb from you. But if you assess them through a research or a project where the students really did not explore or discover much, so you put them there in a situation that is beyond their zone of proximal development, you are setting them for failure. So it is important to understand that your assessment is very deeply connected to the approach that you choose, which is behaviorist, cognitivist, or constructivist, and to the methods and strategies that you choose that match with the approach and hence at the end matches with the assessment. So this week we're studying that middle area between the approaches and assessments. We're studying this middle area of the methods and strategies. So what are the best practices that we can use in our classroom? What are the good methods and strategies that I can use in my ESOL classroom? I'm sure that you took courses on methodology and bilingualism, but today we're just, or this week actually, we're brushing on in our information, and we're trying to build the connection between this part, this piece, and the assessment, which is coming in our module 3. Okay, so in If you go to Blackboard, you'll find this Excel sheet that has what you see in front of you, the list of the methods. And I have the methods here written for you, and then I have the general methods of teaching that matches with it. What are the strategies that best implements the method, and then some videos and examples for you if you want to see the application of this method. How can I apply this? You can go to this last column. And I want to make sure that you understand the difference between these terms: approach, method, strategy, technique. The approach is the bigger umbrella of your philosophy, your views of teaching, and that matches with the approaches that we talked about last week. The behaviorist approach, your approach, how you approach teaching. How do you see teaching? How do you envision your philosophy? So that's the approach: behaviorist, cognitivist, or constructivist. Okay, that's the bigger umbrella. And then under the approaches come the term methods. And the term method means the tools or the way that you're going to implement your approach. Okay, so what is the method or the way or the path that you're going to choose in order to be able to implement your chosen approach? Okay, now after the method comes the strategy. What are the activities, basically? What are the activities that you can use under the method that you chose or the path that you chose? So strategy is the smaller concept under the method. It's your performance of the method. What are the performances that you're going to do in your classroom? And then a technique is whatever your touch. It's your touch of the strategy. If I say cooperative learning, or if I say lecturing, that's the strategy that you're going to use, right? Now the technique is, how are you going to lecture? For example, I lecture by PowerPoints. I lecture by using chalk and blackboard. I lecture by discussions and half of guided reading and half of discussion and half of me drawing organizers on the board. So it's your touch. It's your imprint of how you envision this strategy or the performance. So I hope this part is clear, just to make sure that we have this distinction between each term. So the first method is concept mapping. It's a method of teaching. And in red here, I wrote chunks just as a reminder. One word to remind you of the format of this method. What is the format of this method? So concept mapping, but what I mean by concept mapping is chunking information. And here's the definition. This method focuses on the structuring and chunking of knowledge. Okay, then that's a great method. Okay, what are the strategies? What is the performances? How can I do chunking? You can do that by doing foldables. Many teachers focus on the use of foldables a lot in order to get factual information right there at the finger point of their students. And from there, you can see how this is a behaviorist approach, right? A behaviorist approach is very guided and it's very protective of the students. They want to chunk information. You want to have all factual information there at the fingertip of your students because you want them to memorize it and you want them to put them down and in their evaluation assessments. So one way, a strategy that can match with this method of the approach of the behaviors is foldable, interactive notebook, graphic organizers, and tables and charts. And this is a website to give you more information of this format or this performance. How does the teacher use this in a classroom? And I'm sure that it's going to be a good, helpful video for you to just view that. How do teachers do this? I know that many teachers now use this because of the SOLs. You want to chunk information for your students to be able to answer questions. So it is a method, and you want to learn the strategies behind them. Another method is role playing, where you're doing hypothetical situations in order to put your students in real life situations, right? From that method, you can tell that this is a cognitivist approach or maybe a constructivist approach. Both work under, this method goes under both approaches. So this method means students are put in hypothetical situations to learn in an interactive way through real life examples. You're making a situation for them in order to put themselves in the shoes of a character or put themselves in a situation where they have to react based on what they're learning. So it is important for the students to get this experience. Now, what are the strategies, the performances that you can do in your classroom, or the activities that you can do in your classroom to best integrate role playing? You can do drama play, which has to be objectives based. You have to know what you want out of this play. Why are you teaching these students this specific through this specific play? You have to list your objectives and what you want them to learn after they finish this play or after performing this play. Case studies is something also considered, a strategy also considered under the method of role playing, because people start to think of a specific character or a specific case or a specific problem, and they try to put themselves in the shoes of that person or in the situation of that person, and they try to solve it. Simulations to begin class with. You can do a performance at the beginning of the class just to stimulate students' understanding, and this simulation usually get them hooked and involved in the process. Example of a role play other than drama acting you'll find here in this video. Please open them, take the time, read this, and open the videos or open any resource that I provide for you in order to just give you an extra explanation. Direct instruction is different than direct method. Direct instruction is more of an interactive lecture. It's objectives based. Teaching and learning is interactive between the teacher and the students. The focus is on the ends of the learning rather than the means of the teaching. So I want them at the end to get the idea of whatever that objective is. So whatever will take me at that moment to get them to that end is my ultimate goal. So the strategies that match with this is backward strategies, and it's mainly based on putting the objectives and then work from the objectives to get to the ultimate end. You do discussions, timelines, lectures, vocabulary activities, all of that together, or one of these, as long as you're going to get to the final objectives. So you put the objectives as your ultimate goal right here, and then whatever that will take you to achieve this objective, you go backwards, because you're going back to the objective. Every time you design something in this lesson, you go back and refer it to the objectives. Here is another web resource, a video resource for you to see how direct instruction is integrated in the ESOL classroom, or even in a general ed classroom that has ESOL students in it. Direct method is the complete opposite. It is very traditional teaching using the chalk and talk process of a lecture. Traditional way of teaching, it is a teacher-centered. So where does this belong? This method belongs to which method? To which approach, I'm sorry. This method belongs to which approach? Correct, to the behaviorist approach. There's a lower stress because students are not really put in situations where they have to answer questions. They are mainly listening and absorbing the information. High grades and high stakes are always in the process, because you want to learn as much and you want to answer at the end in the test to get this highest grade. So how do you do that? How does the teacher use this method in a classroom? What are the activities that best matches with this method? The best strategies are demonstrations. Teacher can bring something and demonstrate an experiment, or demonstrate a process, or act out something for best to make sure that the students are getting it and can understand it and see the facts and understand the facts. Also, teachers can use lecturing with the traditional PowerPoints or chalk explanation on the board. Note taking, students are taking notes and worksheets to keep a continuum of practice. So something like get ready. You want to start this. This is kind of a performance or demonstration word that the teacher uses to grab the student's attention. Repeat after me. Repeat this phrase to start. Teacher prompt gestures or noise or taps. Reading while pointing to the finger of the words. Teachers ask the students to always point with their fingers, because you want to assess that they're following and their attention is all to the content that you're teaching. Taking turns answering questions, and again it brings back the idea of having good grades, making sure that students memorize facts. All of that is direct questioning and direct answers, and you're looking always for facts. You don't look for extra thinking behind or beyond a concept. This is the complete opposite of the direct method. This is inquiry-based learning method. The inquiry-based learning method is how the brain works. It's mainly looking at creating a creative classroom. You want the students to explore, understand, and come up with new information, their own formed information from the process, or throughout the process they gain experiences, and through these experiences they come themselves to the conclusion, to the end result. So what does teacher do? Teacher provokes the learning process by open-ended questions, not direct factual questions. And that's important for you to understand. If you assess students who were taught in the direct method, then your questions should be factual questions looking for facts that were memorized. But if you're a teacher who used inquiry-based method, you're asking questions not for facts, but for critical thinking, for creative thinking, for thinking beyond the text, inferencing. If what happens if you flip and your assessment for a direct method is critical, then your students are going to start to be confused. You'll hear this sentence, "We did not take this before." Yes, you taught them to wait for what they're going to have to learn. Anything beyond what you have said is not taken before. Now, how about if you give a factual question for an inquiry-based classroom? You're going to be looked at like someone who's asking a very trivial question beyond what they can think of. It is not going to be challenging, and it's not going to be in anywhere in the zone of proximal development. It will be at the student's level, which is something against the method that you are choosing to use in your classroom environment. What are the activities or the performances or what we call strategies that you can use within such a method? You can use project-based research or learning. You can use researching, experimenting, discussions and debates, hands-on activities using manipulatives. These are the strategies that come under the inquiry-based method. Okay, now can you give me some tips? The tips is guiding questions. You want to have critical questions, questions that look for creativity in order to lead them through their research and experiments and discussions. You're getting the students, that's the key factor, is to get the students engaged, get them intrinsically motivated in the process, and hence through that engagement and through that deep level of questioning, students reach the knowledge that you wanted them to explore. Questions have to be appropriate and discovery based, problem based. It is usually time consuming to do such a method, to design such a method with its strategies and activities, but usually all of the planning needs to be done before the lesson. But once the lesson starts, the students are doing everything else, and you gave them all the resources and guidance beforehand, and you let them explore on their own. Okay, the next method is the logical method, acquiring and producing. That's where students are actually grasping subconsciously a certain piece of knowledge, and then from there they test their prior knowledge of what they have just acquired and their prior knowledge in order to, at the end, produce the knowledge that you want them to understand or explore. Students acquire and produce knowledge to recognize patterns. How? Inductively, deductively, or analytically and through synthesis. So inductive, you teach them through the bigger picture. You teach them the small picture until they reach the bigger picture, or you teach them deductively through showing them the whole idea, and then they divided it into parts through their exploration, or you analyze together the information, and at the end, students structure and synthesize or summarize what they have learned. So this is the process of the logical methods. You're always doing mostly at least 3 out of these 4 in your classroom. You're choosing either inductive or deductive to start up with, but then you're always analyzing and synthesizing throughout the process. Now, you're going to ask me, what are the strategies? How can I implement such a method? You want to implement such a method by doing more of organizers, research, discussions, observing and listing information, comparing and contrasting, providing visual charts and games, timelines. All of that are important to get the students to analyze information and synthesize it. Now, it depends. If you're doing inductive teaching, then you're going to kind of chunk information a little bit, tear them into parts in order to get them to understand the whole or bigger picture, which might be something like what we're doing here, trying to chunk this information through modules to understand the whole overall picture of not only assessment, but the whole process of instruction and assessment. But if you're doing a deductive, then you show the whole picture first, and then you tear them apart, each one on its own, to understand terms and concepts. So what you're doing here, you can research lesson plans to look at the lesson plan process of an inductive and lesson plan of a deductive model of teaching under this logical method of teaching. I didn't want to choose one for you. I just wanted you to research it to find this piece of information and choose the lesson plan that best matches with the content that you're teaching. So go ahead and research inductive lesson plan in reading or math, whatever the content that you're teaching. It's useful for comparison. Students have to think for themselves. High level of challenge, use a lot of differentiation in such a method because you want to make better choices in your research, and students who are doing research have to make sure that they understand the content that they're researching. So you're probably doing a lot of differentiation and scaffolding among your students to best serve their different needs. There is a video that I posted for you on Blackboard that gives you a lot of good information on